Your seats, strap in for a wild ride. We're going to take you on a wild ride tonight. Welcome everybody. My name's Peter. I'm the president of the Space Association. And tonight, you're all going to become 50 years younger than you are now. Now, Sean, I'm not sure what that's going to mean for you, mate. I really don't know. You could be in trouble over there. But the rest of us will be loving it, right? Oh, Mike, you might be in trouble too. So welcome everybody. Thanks for coming out tonight. I apologise for this change of venue again, but we're trying to nail down a consistent venue, but we'll be getting there. Now, this piece of artwork, I think Andrew Rennie might be giving us some more information about that later on tonight. Is that right, Andrew? Fantastic. So, unless anyone puts their hands up and knows what it is. There we go. The asteroid. It's the Japanese satellite and their landers. Just the picture they took. Just they landed, was it, or just before landing? The rover. Fantastic. They call it a rover. The hopper. It must say it reminds me of that psychedelic sequence in 2001. But anyway. All right. So welcome everyone, and once again, wait for our logo to move across. There we go. So tonight we've got a really fun night for you. So we'll just do a quick little overview of what's happening at the association. We'll try to keep that quick. Then we're going to be getting to the main feature of the night, which is when you all become 50 years younger than you are today. Then we're going to have a little bit of break at 7:30. Go and say hello to someone you haven't spoken to before, haven't seen before. And then we're going to have an industry update on with Angelo and Mike, space industry, and then we're going to have Planetary and Science update with Andrew Rennie. So let's get started because things are going to be pretty tight. here tonight. So yeah, we were at the AstroLight Festival 3 weeks ago, gents, was it? At Scienceworks. It was a great night, and I don't know how many thousands of people that were there, but we were invited to have an exhibit there. So we had a little information table. They had some really cool speakers. Andrew Boyd and Dale Isles, amongst other people, were there. And Naomi Mathers also gave an update on the space industry, which unfortunately I wasn't able to personally go and have a look. But I think we've recorded, Andrew Rennie's recorded a number of those sessions on audio. So we'll be broadcasting those probably in about 5 years' time. No, soon on the space show. We'll have to have a backlog day. We'll just do 24-hour space show, and we'll just get rid of all the backlog, whatever you reckon. Yeah, so that's the Space Association's own radio show. People are not aware that goes to air every Wednesday night on 88.3 Southern FM, but it's also live streamed. And then you can also go to the Southern FM website, and that program will be fully online for the next week, the full program, and you can click and listen to it. And then there'll be subsections of that later on for podcasts, interviews, and special features. So this is a couple of pictures from the AstroLight festivals. This is where it had some cooperation with the Melbourne Association of Rocketry Sciences and some other Tripoli people. So that's the model rocket engine that boosted the 1-to-1 scale Saturn V2 rocket a couple of years ago, and so that was a big talking point for a lot of people. And we had a bunch of other models and scale models of the universe, etc. Angelo was really working the crowd, inspiring some young space explorers there, so that was really nice. Everyone pitched in really well. Thank you, everyone that did participate. Were you? About what? All right. The other thing this coming up this month is a new movie that's been released called First Man, based on the book by James Hansen about astronaut and the first man on the moon, Neil Armstrong. So it's had a preview release at some festivals, etc. It's received some very, very good press and very good reviews. So I believe that it's going to be premiering here in Melbourne on from October 11. Is that correct, Andrew? I think for public, the general public. Yeah, but that's a preview. I think the public premiere or public available for public. Yeah, yeah, the public. The great unwashed. Yeah. Correct. Yes, but the actual for the public will be 11th, I believe. So yeah, it's directed by Damien Chazelle and it stars Ryan Gosling. So it's supposed to be a good film. So and it's well done. It also has a lot of credibility because James Hansen did a really good book on the biography, but also Neil Armstrong's sons were actively involved in the movie as well. So they've kind of given it a tick of approval. So I'm looking forward to that. Yeah, didn't have the right stuff, you reckon? Oh, is that right? Yeah. I mean, I think they were saying that they do want to have like an impersonator, but they did want to have someone that was kind of drawing the crowds, but also sort of yeah, it does help, but also sort of conveying the kind of the mood and the type of attitude the guy had. So hopefully it's a good job. Just a reminder, we do meet on a monthly basis here at RMIT. The normal formula is the fourth Monday of the month. So consequently, we're here tonight. Next two meetings will be October 22 and November 26. Then December, because the fourth Monday gets to crazy time, we'll be either having something on the 10th or the 17th. We'll know that pretty shortly, and we'll announce all the details of it at the next meeting. In the past few years, we've had trivia nights, which have been a fun night. Probably going to do that again, but we might do something different, who knows. And once again, we do urge you and encourage you to take a look at your membership, make sure it's up to date, and Get a friend to join. It's the campaign. Get a friend to join the Space Association. Tim, our membership officer, I hope is going to be along shortly. So with that, we're going to go to the main feature. I don't have a timer thing, Mike. Were you going to set a timer up or not? It's okay. Give me the wind up. I'll just try and find where my mouse is. Right. Lighting. What's the deal with lighting in here? Oh. Sorry. Got ahead of myself. That's better. No, I think it's okay. Go to analog. So, Apollo 11 plus 50. So yes, next year, 2019, is the 50th anniversary of the moon landing, Apollo 11. So we're going to take a bit of a look at that with our series we're calling Footsteps to the Moon, the countdown to Apollo 11. So the series is going to be providing kind of real-time updates on a monthly basis about what's happening between September of 1968 to July 1969. So we're going to be having a bit of fun with that. We're going to have a quick look back at earlier, before September 68, just to give a bit of a context of what's been going on, and then we'll come up to date tonight up to September 1968. So we're going to be showing different parts of the program. I mean, there's so much was going on in that period of time that it's impossible to touch everything. So I've just tried to grab a few unique things, maybe some things people haven't seen before, maybe some things people were involved with. I don't know. We've got a pretty diverse bunch of people in the room. But anyway, we'll try to keep it fun and interesting. So then basically we're going to culminate July of next year with the actual 50th anniversary of Apollo 11. I initially thought I'd try to do a parallel what was happening in the Soviet Union at September 68, etc., etc., what was happening in Australia, but I thought it's too hard to kind of track all that stuff because, there's a lot going on. And back then in the Soviet Union, you really didn't have a good understanding of what was happening, when it was happening, and there wasn't much material, video, imagery available. So I'm going to try and make a couple of the months just specialising in what the Soviet Union might be, and I might ask my friend Igor over here, who was actually there. Don't remember, he's been brainwashed, and we might do a presentation together. Yeah, and of course there's a bunch of resources in Australia here talking about what happened in Australia, and some pretty significant involvement from Australia in that program as well. So so we're going to look at the program. We're going to start back in 66, actually. So now, when we'll bring up to date to September 68. So, are you ready? Strap in. We're going to the time machine. We are now in September of 1968. Oops. Just to set the mood. I know, I'd love to play the whole lot of that, but we've got a show to do. Yeah, so that was 68. So I don't know about you, but I don't reckon music's progressed that much since the Beatles, but that's my own personal opinion. Tonight we're going to be using the very latest 1968 technology. We've got video on demand available for you. I've been working all day on the word processor, which has been quite interesting. And I was going to bring some handouts for you, but the Ronio machine, we ran out of metho. So unfortunately, you're going to have to just watch it on screen. But we have got the latest data projection technology available for you tonight. So I hope you enjoy that. A lot of people going, yeah, I remember all that. Yeah, fantastic. So what was happening in Australia in September? John Gorton was that Prime Minister. Henry Bolte was the Premier, and he apparently had some crazy idea that one day he wanted to build a bridge and have his name on it. What an egomaniac. So we had 12 million people in Australia back then. Carlton beat Essendon by 3 points in the grand final. And the number one song in the charts for 68 was Hey Jude with the flip side, double A side. And I had that record. And you know what? It was so funny. We bought that record. In fact, my brother bought it. We took it back to the shop because we thought the Revolution side had a fuzz on it and we thought something was wrong with the record. Oh, well. So the median salary was $3,812 and the median house price was $10,500. So what, triple the median salary? So 3 years' wages? I think it's a bit more than that these days, proportion. And whole Monaro would cost you $3,090. And Skippy the Bush Kangaroo came on TV. Fantastic. And I was starting my glorious world-beating tennis career. Here I am. And I just saving up my paper round, I'd bought that model. I fell in love for the first time. I was inspired by the technology and the humour. I was scared by the Twilight Zone. These guys were pretty good. They just had Batman and Robin, yes. Jetsons. These guys, I'm not sure. I was watching the cartoon, The Beatles. And I was in love with Ellie Mae as well. And Julius Sumner Miller. You remember him? He's fantastic. Why is it so? And of course, the Flintstones were on TV. So once again, I don't think things have progressed that much in 2018. Back in the worldwide, the US president was LBJ. We had the Prague Spring, the Tet Offensive in Vietnam. LBJ was in a lot of trouble with Vietnam and what he was going to do. Martin Luther King was assassinated. And there was student protests about the war and the US and everything along that time. Then Robert F. Kennedy was assassinated as well. So pretty shocking year all round. Then they had the Democratic Convention in Chicago and they had a lot of protests, etc. The Boeing 747 was introduced. And of course there was the Olympic protests. In fact, that was one of the Australians involved there as well. He recently passed away, I believe. So let's look at the Apollo, get onto the space stuff. So Apollo 1966, once again, there was a lot of stuff happening, but I've just pulled out a couple of things I thought you might find interesting. First time we actually saw a fully stacked Saturn V rocket. It was not going to fly, it was a dummy vehicle, but it was used for testing facilities at KSC. They had been mating using the platforms and the towers and things like that to test connections, etc., and support equipment. They duplicated their flight configuration. I'm not going to read all these words. You're more than welcome to read them all yourself. But basically, it was just a fit and function test for that. They stacked it on the launcher, and then they had the instrument unit on March the 30th. Then they had the command and service module on top. So this is some stacking the 500F vehicle, and get the feeling of the dimensions of it. You see the guys at the bottom here. I'm not sure you can see where I'm pointing over on this screen, but yeah, that's guys there. So that stage, I really have no idea, Angelo. That's a good question. So then it was rolled out onto the launch pad, pad 39A, on May the 25th, and it was rolled back because a hurricane came, and then they put it back on June 10th, which was my birthday. they basically culminated in a wet test. So they actually did some fueling of the tanks, etc. So it was a pretty close to, flight ready, I guess, vehicle. So it was pretty impressive. So they used that for doing that, verifying connections. Then it moved off the pad on October the 14th. Keep note of all these dates because things were happening so quickly back then. We've been building this SLS for how long, and we haven't even got a bit of. Yeah. Shepherd had just gone up. That's 66. Yeah, it's 5 years. Oh, okay. Do you want me to use the microphone? Oh, okay. All right, no worries. So this is the actual vehicle on the mobile launcher, and once again, you do get a bit of a scale here of the people down there at the bottom of that. And then it went out to the pad, and in fact, they were at one stage going to build 3 Apollo pads, A, B, and C. C never got done. But it's always good to know if there's a rocket around, whether to slow down or stop or go. I always find it's not like you'd notice it or anything. Anyway, 5 launch pads. Oh my god! Wow. So the 500F was actually on the pad when they launched this. I think it was a Titan C, Titan 3C. Thank you, Tim. Yeah. So that went off there. So that was a pretty impressive photograph. So they brought the stack back inside the VAB, and they started this unique test, which I've never seen before, and I'd be interested to know if they're going to do it with the SLS or other vehicles. I don't know whether they do it with the shuttle or not, but they started this vibration, shaking the actual vehicle to test the stability on the launch pad, etc. And in fact, during the test, the escape power top broke off, but no one was injured. It was then destacked on the 21st of October. Greetings, welcome. And I do have a video. But apart from the piano at the start. So here they are at the top of the rocket. These guys strapped in, and they're just shaking the thing, trying to build up a resonance, That's pretty impressive, isn't it? Look at that. So they're testing all of the connections and the stability of the connections. Yeah, so these guys, imagine being selected to do that. It's fantastic. And as I say, the launch tower top broke off. I love it. So what was that, Pete Conrad's all weather testing? It didn't quite get the lightning, did they? But yeah. I thought you'd like to see that. So I do have another video report here, which goes for a little while, but how are we doing on time? 6:52. It's kind of cool. It's not the full report, but I've just edited it down a bit.
Were in final systems installation before entering acceptance testing. The modules were shipped to Cape Kennedy in April 1966. In Block 2 manufacturing, the inner crew compartment section for the first Block 2 command module was in ultrasonic testing. Sound waves are used to determine the quality of the bond between the aluminum honeycomb reinforcing panels and the underlying aluminum shell. Crew compartment sections for Command Module 103, the first spacecraft to be available for a lunar mission, were in chemical degreasing and etching prior to having reinforcing panels bonded. Degreasing assures a continuous bond of the honeycomb reinforcing structures. A final dip in a sulfuric acid solution etches a slight tooth in the metal. This helps assure a permanent grip of the bonding agents. The third major Apollo spacecraft component is the spacecraft LEM adapter. North American manufactures the adapter at its Tulsa, Oklahoma facility. The 29-foot-high adapter is constructed chiefly of aluminum honeycomb sections. Tests were begun at Tulsa to perfect the adapter's panel separation system. In space, the panels will be blown back to permit the extraction of the LEM. Transportation of the first adapter sections from Tulsa to Cape Kennedy was handled by Army helicopters. Adapter number 4 for the O-11 spacecraft was delivered early in 1966. The 22-foot-high Lunar Excursion Module is the fourth major component of the Apollo configuration. It is produced by Grumman Aircraft Engineering Corporation, Bethpage, Long Island. The LEM subsystems parallel those of the Command and Service modules. They include an environmental control unit, an alignment optical telescope, and various communication and radar antennas. Storage bays in the module's descent stage will hold scientific equipment that will be used during the lunar stay. A collapsible antenna, for example, will be erected and left on the Moon for transmitting scientific data back to Earth. Manufacturing efforts at Grumman were reflected in assembly progress on the first flight-configured ground test article. The module will be retained at Bethpage as a house development spacecraft. The first flight article LEM, scheduled for an unmanned flight aboard the 6th Saturn 1B launch vehicle, was in structural assembly. It was on schedule for delivery to Cape Kennedy in late 1966. Propulsion Ascent Stage Number 2 is destined for hot firing tests at NASA's White Sands Test Facility. The LEM test area at White Sands was completed in early 1965. It contains one ambient pressure stand and 2 altitude stands. Tests of the facility's steam generating system were begun in February 1966. The equipment successfully produced a simulated altitude of 125,000 feet. The chambers are evacuated by ejecting high-pressure steam past the chamber vents. In January 1965, heavyweight ascent stage test rig number 3 was installed in the ambient pressure stand at White Sands. The rig contains heavyweight tanks, tubing, connections, and fittings for the initial subsystem firing tests. The first firings using the HA-3 test rig and a Bell Aerosystems ascent engine took place in April 1965. Altitude tests of the ascent stage propulsion subsystem will begin at the facility in mid-1966. Development altitude firings of the Bell engine were completed at the Air Force's Tullahoma test facility. Qualification testing of the engine began in April 1966. Developmental firings of the LEM descent engine were conducted by TRW at Tullahoma. And at the company's high-altitude test stand, San Juan Capistrano. In support of Apollo development schedules, a number of specialized test facilities have been created. Guidance and navigation equipment is calibrated with the aid of this spacecraft polarity checker. A crew couch vibration tester was used to determine the structural reliability of couch components subjected to launch vibrations. Command module heat shield structures are being subjected to the alternate hot and cold temperature extremes that will be encountered in space in this thermal testing facility. This is a tumbling and cleaning fixture designed to dislodge foreign particles which could become free-floating contaminants during spaceflight. Command module 006 was used in the demonstration test of the fixture. The outdoor pool at Downey was used for continued structural testing. A boilerplate spacecraft fitted with an aft heat shield structure of the type intended for spacecraft 009 was dropped to determine the structure's ability to withstand the most severe conditions of impact angle and velocity anticipated for Apollo. This is a playback of the drop test photographed by high-speed cameras inside the command module. Failure of the heat shield supporting structure resulted in design changes which were successfully demonstrated in later water drop tests. The pool facility was also used to verify the integrity of other command module structures, such as the crew tunnel and crew compartment. These scenes show the second of two positions in which the module can stabilize itself in the water, either apex up or apex down, as shown here. To invert an apex down spacecraft, a righting bag system was developed by North American. Block 1 testing will be completed by mid-1966. Development work of a different sort was underway in perfecting the designs of Apollo lunar mission spacesuits. Engineering models of the soft suit pressure garment and backpack were delivered by the contractors, International Latex, Dover, Delaware, for the suit, Hamilton Standard, Windsor Locks, Connecticut, for the backpack. The equipment is part of the Apollo Extravehicular Mobility Unit, which includes an extravehicular visor assembly that can be attached to the helmet. The tinted visors can be used singly or in combination. The latest developmental hard suit for Apollo extended lunar surface investigations and possible deep space applications was also demonstrated. The lightweight aluminum and fiberglass assembly was developed by Litton Systems Incorporated, Beverly Hills, California. Apollo goals came closer to operational status with the arrival of the first production Apollo spacecraft at the Kennedy Space Center in October 1965. Following an extensive program of inspections, cleaning, build-up, and testing, the mated command and service modules provided the first view of flight-configured Apollo spacecraft modules. On December 26th, the command and service modules and the attached adapter section were mated to the Saturn 1B Launch Vehicle 201 at Launch Complex 34. Saturn Launch Vehicle development is under the direction of the Marshall Space Flight Center, Huntsville, Alabama. Throughout January and February of 1966, pre-flight tests were conducted to ensure every possibility of mission success. The unmanned spacecraft was scheduled to be launched on a 5,000-mile ballistic trajectory down the Atlantic Test Range. The mission would also help confirm the all-up concept of flight testing, in which all launch vehicle and spacecraft components will be flown together live for the first time. On launch morning, February 26th, low gaseous control pressures in the launch vehicle forced several recyclings of the countdown and an eventual scrub. However, 10 minutes later, the problem was corrected and the scrub decision was reversed. At 11:12 a.m. Eastern Standard Time, February 26th, Apollo Saturn Mission 201 was on its way. Staging occurred approximately 2.5 minutes after launch. The 200,000-pound thrust second stage engine then ignited and propelled the spacecraft to a 310-mile altitude. This was the separation action recorded by an onboard camera. "40 minutes later, the command module landed approximately 43 nautical miles short of its predicted impact point. Recovery was performed by crews aboard the carrier Boxer. Mission objectives included subjecting the command module's heat shield to a fast re-entry heat buildup. 2 burns of the surface propulsion subsystem accelerated the re-entry speed of the spacecraft so that heat rate buildup approached the values that will be encountered during lunar mission re-entries. Fluctuations in SPS engine firing chamber pressures degraded the entry velocity, resulting in lower surface temperatures than planned. However, data protractions verified that the current heat shield design is able to withstand an atmospheric entry from a lunar mission. The successful completion of the first Apollo-Saturn mission was one of the most important accomplishments to date in the development of a manned lunar mission capability. In summary, progress during the reporting period saw Apollo system hardware in manned qualification testing. There were problems, but they were overcome with no distress to overall schedules. Flight Article Apollo spacecraft have started to come off the assembly line. And subsystems tests have given way to full-scale flight verification testing. In all levels of Apollo spacecraft activity, program milestones continued to point the way to a scheduled manned lunar landing within this decade.
So that was 66, so 5 years from when Kennedy said we're going to go to the moon. So the amount of progress on all those different areas, incredible. So we move forward now to 1967, and the US was getting ready for its first manned Apollo flight, Apollo 1, on a Saturn 1B with Ed White, Gus Grissom, and Roger Chaffee on board. The objective here was to, it was originally designated 204, so the first manned Apollo mission. So it was planned to be an orbital, low Earth orbital test, and it was scheduled to be launched 21st of February 67. Probably everyone in the room knows what happened there, where there was a fire in the cabin, killed the crew, and changed the program significantly and put a significant delay in everything. I don't want to go into too much detail. I think it's well and truly understood. So go ahead. Yeah. Yep. Correct. The Block 1 was the Earth orbit only configuration, designed for only Earth orbit. Block 2 was designed for the deep space lunar missions. So yeah, so the Apollo 1 capsule was a Block 1, and of course the changes that came about, one of which of course was the redesigned hatch, which proved to be completely useless and dangerous for the crew and fatal for the crew on Apollo 1, was modified completely. So as you can see, this is the resultant fire and the damage that took place on the outside of the vehicle, and you can see here, this is a shot once the crew had been removed of the inside of the capsule. So very tragic, but in many ways, a lot of people have said that Apollo 1 actually was a key to success of the Apollo program subsequently, because they sorted out so many issues and so many problems. If the fire had happened in space or out at the moon, they would have very little understanding of what exactly went wrong and all those issues. So very sad, obviously very sad, but it imposed a necessary break on the program, slow them down, re-evaluate what they're doing, and move on from there. So that was 1967, January. There were some other things still happening in 67, and I've got a video here that talks about what happened in one area, which was quite exciting. This only goes for a short period of time. Actually, you got a problem?
Is the big shot, the ride without astronauts of the giant Saturn V rocket. Project Apollo. This is Apollo 4, the test of our moon rocket in flight for the first time. It is the beginning, the first of many steps which will someday put men on the surface of the moon.
Good morning. Behind me is the largest single object man has ever attempted to lift off the face of the Earth. Its official designation is Saturn V. It stands as tall as a 36-story building, and though it is unmanned for this flight, this is the monster rocket which ultimately will place men on the moon.
10, 9, ignition sequence start. 5, 4, we have ignition. All engines are running. We have liftoff. We have liftoff at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. The tower has...
My God, our building's shaking here. Our building's shaking. The roar is terrific. The building's shaking. This big glass window is shaking. We're holding it with our hands. Look at that rocket go into the clouds at 3,000 feet. The roar is terrific. Look at it going. You can see it. You can see it. Part of our roof is coming here.
We don't know if you can hear, ladies and gentlemen, but all the flight is moving along as it should be, but our observation, the NBC observation booth, is literally being shaken apart. Our tape recorders are being thrown to the floor by the roar of this mighty rocket as it continues to climb into the sky on its 7.5 million pounds of thrust. It is a beautiful sight, an unbelievable sight.
Frank, there's just never been anything like it. The Titan II that powered Gemini, the Mercury Atlas that powered John Glenn on our early orbital flights, they looked impressive at the time. But not until you felt your flesh vibrate and your desk lift and your body thunder with the vibration from that rocket going could you sense the excitement. It's just big, and it worked better the first time than anything we've ever used. The spacecraft is now well into its first revolution around the Earth and a historic flight well underway. Frank?
Thank you very much, Jules. I know you've had a very pleasant morning. Well, Apollo 4 is on the way, and the mission apparently seems to be going well. I think for NASA and for America's space program, you can say, oh, what a beautiful morning this has been. This is Frank Reynolds in New York.
Yeah, apparently it shook the booth apart in the NBC broadcast facilities at the Kennedy Space Center there. So we move on into 68. Yes. That's correct. Yes, we'll talk about that very shortly. Yeah. Yep. They put one on a Saturn 1B and then later on a Saturn 5. So yep. So just a few things. Well, obviously a lot of things happened and I had to pare things down. So January 7-10, the surveyor landed, reached the lunar surface. Here's the answer to your question. Saturn 1B rocket launches unmanned Apollo 5 with a lunar module, a testing lunar module on board. And that's the vehicle right there. This is 68. So there it is being hoisted up onto the 1B in its mating adapter. You notice it doesn't need legs on it, but they figure they didn't need legs. And there's the launch of Apollo 5. And once again, I could have videos of all these, and we'd be here until 6 o'clock in the morning. So, so in March, the few things were happening with the crew assignments. Apollo 9 backup crew members Neil Armstrong and Buzz were conducting lunar module system tests. They were in line for the prime crew of Apollo 12 at this stage, and there's a whole bunch of stuff happening relating to the Saturn V boosters as well. I think I might have got something slightly out of order. So this is Neil and Buzz doing some testing on LM4 in March of '68. So once again, they are in line for Apollo 12. This is one of the mock-up lunar module test article, and this was going to be on Apollo 6. So this is a Saturn V, and their plan there was to send the command service module plus the lunar test article into a translunar trajectory. Now, at the time, the moon would not be in the right position, so what they decided to do is to modify it and use the service propulsion engine to slow the spacecraft up and bring it back to Earth and simulate a direct abort scenario. So we've got a bit of video of this guy. This is
T-minus 30 seconds and counting. Number 1 swing arm now being retracted from the Saturn V vehicle. 25 seconds and counting. T-minus 20, still counting at this time. T-minus 15, 14, 13, 12, 11, 10, 9. We have ignition sequence start. 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 0. We have commits. We have liftoff. Liftoff at 7 a.m. Eastern Standard Time. 5 seconds into the flight. We're looking good. We have cleared the tower. We have
understand tower clearance. Houston Center assumes control. Pitch and roll program started. Our vehicle going now to an azimuth heading of 72 degrees. All 5 F1 engines firing, looking good. Given a green light at this time from range safety. Roll program is completed now. Pitch profile still in progress. 40 seconds. Mark 45 seconds. Our vehicle well beyond the beach now. Our IP impact point moving out well over water as desired. Mark 56 seconds. Our cabin pressure is relieving, coming down now from a pad base 16 pounds per square inch. Looking good.
within a reasonable time. I'm going to
fast 1 minute, 10 minute, 10
forward
seconds
this
coming up on a period of
video for a little while so we can get it all done. Can someone see what number's up there? Is it 5?
Mark 1 minute 25 seconds. Pass through max Q, still looking good. Now 10 nautical miles in altitude, heading out beyond the Earth's atmosphere. We're on our way.
Had to fast forward just for interest of brevity.
Mark 7 minutes 45 seconds. We have a preliminary report of a loss of 2 engines. This would be engines 2 and 3. However, our guidance is holding well and we're standing by. Our hydraulics are good, reports booster. We'll stand by for further confirmation of that report. This is only a preliminary report at this time. 8 minutes 10 seconds into the flight. Booster reports at this time we're looking go. So we're standing by at 8 minutes 28 seconds into the flight. Our vehicle now 101 nautical miles in altitude, 780 nautical miles downrange. engines to reports. Our third stage looks good. We're at 8 minutes 52 seconds now into the flight. Altitude 1,000.
Okay, so the vehicle did make it to orbit. However, there were some problems. So there was pogo oscillation, which didn't happen on the earlier Saturn V launch, and it caused some damage to the engines in the second stage, resulting 2 of them shutting down. So, but once again, they were able to burn longer, and the guidance system took over and was able to get it up to orbit. So basically, that was a big problem. So they had to go ahead and delay some other testing that was on the Marshall test facility, Michoud test facility, to make sure that they understood what was going on there. So once again, April '68, right? Still haven't flown anyone on board, and a lot of things are happening. So Neil was out at the Grumman plant checking out Apollo 9's lunar module. Once again, he was serving as backup commander at this stage. April 27, like that was just a couple of weeks after the launch of Apollo 6. They approve a plan to put people on the Saturn V. He based the decision on the fact that the engineers were able to understand what the problem was, and they were able to fix it. So April 24, the mission flew, and April 27, they go through all the nuts and bolts, working out what happened, and put people on. That's gutsy. So then May 6th, over in Texas, Neil Armstrong was practicing his landing techniques in the lunar landing research vehicle, and he bent it big time. So you've probably seen that in other scenarios, but this is what's happening. He was flying along, and they had a problem with the control system, I believe, or one of the thrusters was broken. Anyway, he pitched over significantly, and he punched out, managing to save his life. The vehicle didn't come off so well, but he gained a lot of experience of quick thinking there. So once again, July '68. So they conducted some tests with the modifications that they had come up with to mitigate the pogo problem, and they managed to run those well and get some comfort with what was happening. Now I'm going to start looking at the actual vehicles that are going to be flying on Apollo 11. So July 1968, the Apollo 11 command module is under construction in California. In this particular picture, it hasn't got its heat shield on or anything like that, but it's undergoing systems checks. Once again, this is all post. Once again, I've skipped over a lot of details. Obviously, as a result of the Apollo 1 fire, there was a big inquiry, a lot of design changes to the systems and the command module. Those have all been implemented and being built into the Apollo 11 and other manned Apollo Block 2 vehicles. Once again, July '68, surgeons removed a bone spur from Mike Collins' neck, and they feel that he's going to be offline for a while. He was scheduled to be the command module pilot on the 3rd Apollo mission in early '69, but he was grounded from that. They were not really sure whether he was even going to be able to fly. So he did return later to flight status and became back up on Apollo 8. So once again, there were some more static firing tests, once again confirming the changes that they'd made to the engines and the boosters to get rid of that pogo was going to be proven, and it all performed as planned. So, that was good. August 14, this is interesting stuff. They had a meeting, a secret meeting, well, non-public meeting, with Thomas Paine, Sam Phillips were there. James Webb and George Mueller were in Vienna at the time, and they discussed the feasibility of George Low, I think it was, who had proposed an Apollo 8 circumlunar mission, as opposed to just the Earth orbit with a lunar module, one that they were originally planning on doing, because the lunar module was running behind schedule. So they had some further discussions, and Webb agreed for the plan for December 6th. despite a more suitable, December 20, I don't know what the deal is there, maybe lighting, etc. But they wouldn't make the decision on that until they got a manned Apollo flight off the ground and it worked correctly, which was going to be Apollo 7's task next month, October. Remember, we're September 68 here tonight. Okay, August 19. So they announced that the lunar module was going to be dropped from the Apollo 8 mission, as was advertised to the public previously. At that stage, they didn't mention the fact that they were thinking about sending Apollo 8 around the moon. So Apollo 8's lunar module was going to be pushed onto Apollo 9. So as a result of that, they modified the crew assignments because the original Apollo 8 crew were going to be taking the lunar module out with Jim McDivitt and Dave Scott and Rusty Swigert. They swapped those around, swapped the crews around, and assigned them to Apollo 8 and Apollo 9 respectively. So then the new backup crew for Apollo was Neil Armstrong, Buzz, and Fred Hayes at that stage. Once again, August 1968. So this is Fred and Neil doing some testing and training. I'm not sure exactly what they've got going with an altitude chamber or something of that sort. The Apollo 11, once again, lunar module was under construction in New York. And the boosters that had been tested previously, the vehicle that's going to be used for Apollo 11 was tested, hot fired, and then was moved back for post-checkout, post-firing checkout. And then they're checking it out, making sure it was functioning correctly, checking all the systems are working okay, etc., etc. That's September. So back into September 68. Over at the test facility, the second stage vehicle booster was up on the stand, about to be tested. And another little thing that happened, once again, as I say, a million things in parallel happening, but another thing that was happening was this test on September 4. There was 3 Air Force officers assigned to NASA, and they put on suits and got into a test command module and closed the hatch and conducted a 125-hour test in that thing. So they modified the temperature, they did a whole bunch of things. In fact, they depressurized and opened the door for an hour or so to simulate a spacewalk, and then closed it up and repressurized, all in this containment environment. So this is in 1G, remind you. So like everyone says, in 0G you've got a lot more room, but 1G you're just sitting there in this little room size of a Volkswagen Beetle. So, well, bigger than that. So, would have been a big task. I'm not sure whether they got overtime pay. So, so these guys, Lindsay, Reeder, and Davidson, they emerged. They look like they're pretty happy to be out. This is the 3 guys there. I don't know whether they ever spoke to each other again after that. I'm not quite certain. I haven't got a record of that. But it performed really well. So once again, this was a real certifying test for the Apollo Command module in preparation for the upcoming Apollo 7 mission. Now, meanwhile, the stack was on the pad 34 in the Cape Canaveral Air Force Station, and the crew were undergoing various training and tests and a countdown demonstration test. Here's Walt Cunningham working with the flight, the slide wire system, and there's Wally Schirra standing by there helping out. And that's, once again, this is a countdown demonstration test on the pad. And I've got a little bit of silent video, but I think you might find it interesting. You rarely see this video, but basically this is during the countdown demonstration test, where they suit up, they do everything they would do on launch day, get in the van, go out, get put into the vehicle, shut the door, pressure up, do the tests, etc., etc., and then go to a simulated launch. Now, in this particular case, they also did a simulated emergency egress training. So basically they said, right, you guys are in. Okay, there's a fire, you guys, or something's happened, you guys have got to get out. They had to do it all themselves. So this is some video, or some film, not video, film of them doing that. So they're just about to shut the hatch. This is the new hatch that was modified after Apollo 1. And so there's the hatch coming open. think I'd be moving a bit faster than that if it was real, but I guess they're just being super cautious, making sure that they're getting unstrapped and all that kind of stuff. I think if it was a real emergency, adrenaline would be making you move much faster than that, but yeah. Yeah, up to you. No, up to you. Okay, so he's just been there to monitor for safety, but he obviously wouldn't be there on a real emergency on launch day. So they come out, they've unplugged their suits from the air system, so they're basically breathing the ambient air within the suit at the moment, so they've got to fix that pretty quickly. So they go over and get these portable oxygen packs, whack it around their neck. Has anyone seen this video before? Pretty cool, isn't it? I'll tell you what, I spent so many hours getting this preparation, this presentation ready, and the amount of stuff I've had to leave on the cutting room floor. I think you might. Well, you're probably running while you're doing that, but anyway. So then they've got these armoured personnel carriers or the protected personnel carriers. They come down the lift. So it looks like there's a shower of water coming over there as they run out. I can't get it started. Oh, yes. So pretty heavily insulated the outside of that unit. That van is in the visitor centre at the Kennedy Space Centre now. If you want to go and watch it, go and have a look at it. Whee! Or maybe not. So that'd be a pretty interesting ride in that big bulky spacesuit. But I suppose if your life depended on it, you'd be pretty motivated to jump. And some publicity photos for press. So once again, we are now in September of '68. Next month, we're going to see if Apollo 7 works. So while that was happening in September, the Apollo 8 crew were doing some training and some testing and simulated flight altitude chamber testing with their spacecraft. So that's Jim Lovell over here, Bill Anders and Frank Borman down there. So what else was happening in October of '68? Well, that's next month, remember. We're going to have the Mexico Olympics. The Beatles are finishing their album, the White Album, which will be due for release in November. The Monkees just completed a tour of Australia. And Barbarella is going to be released. Is that right? Fantastic. All right, so next month we're going to be looking at Apollo 7. So it'll be the first crewed Apollo space mission. And it'll be the first US manned flight since Gemini 12 in November 66. So obviously Apollo 1 didn't get anywhere in January 67. So it's been almost 2 years since the US has had anyone up in space. So they're targeting launch for October 11. So we'll see how they go, see how the weather goes. So the primary objectives will be to obviously test the command service module and the performance of the crew, mission support facilities, etc., and the command service module rendezvous capability. So that's the objectives of that test. And also in October, the guys up at Honeysuckle Creek, they had been tracking Apollo 4, 5, and 6, and they sort of were working with the manned space flight network, which they were part of. And that required them liaising heavily with Houston, etc., and acquiring and tracking spacecraft in Earth orbit. But really, Honeysuckle Creek was really designed for more of a deep space tracking station, but they were doing work to verify their equipment on those other missions, and including Apollo 7. So it's going to be the first opportunity for really to test out the hardware. September of this month, actually, Al Shepard came out and visited Honeysuckle Creek, and that's Tom Reed. Now, for people who are interested in Tom Reed, there is a book coming out about Tom Reed later this year. I had a chat with the author. I can't remember his name right now. Mikey, do you remember? Anyway, well, the details about that when it comes out. So it'd be quite fascinating there. Tom Reed, Australian, yeah. So this is interesting. This is a picture from, if you ever get a chance and get a free afternoon, go to the honeysucklecreek.net website. There's a wealth of stuff. And this is a picture of an interesting picture. Once again, September of 68. And they were basically using their equipment and calibrating their equipment to track moving objects. And what they did, they had a NASA Super Constellations aircraft set up, and they were using the dish to track and follow the aircraft around, and they had a transmitter on there to simulate space derived telemetry. So pretty fascinating stuff. They had a lot of good stuff going on up there. So we'll see you at our next meeting. Godspeed Apollo 7, and let's see how they go. And that is the end of that little segment. And I think I'm on time. See if we've got any questions. Thank you. Am I on time, Mike? Good grief. All right, well, thank you for that. As I say, there was so much stuff I had to leave out. There was stuff happening in the spacesuits, in the tracking, in the or any area you can think of, and I've just tried to pull out a few things that I thought people might find interesting. There's a wealth of stuff out there on YouTube and things. If you go to the NASA films and things, it's like you could just spend the rest of your life looking at it. But hope you enjoyed tonight. It's going to be a series, as I mentioned at the start. Every month between now and July, we're going to be doing this, or myself or maybe somebody else. May not be quite as long and detailed as this one, because we had to catch up, remember, from 66 to September 68. So now we're just going to be looking at October 68 next month, November, December, January, etc., as we go. So I guess the overall thing is that I wanted to impress on people is just the phenomenal pace and decision-making that was going on, even in the face of astronauts being killed and stuff blowing up and things. There was just so many things just moving forward and pushing forward. That it really is quite incredible. And that decision to go ahead with Apollo 8 so soon after the pogo issues they'd had to put people on the Saturn V, just an example of the go for it attitude and the confidence they had. And keep in mind, they were using slide rules and that sort of stuff. They weren't simulating things with supercomputers back then. So draw blueprints, slide rules, and one fundamental. Well, how much are they spending on the SLS? And yeah, waste anything except time. Yeah. All right, well, we're going to take a break now for a little while. We're going to come back at... Thank you, appreciate that. So at 8 o'clock, we'll reconvene for our space news. Okay, we're back. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for that. I hope you had something to eat and drink. We're back now with the rest of our meeting. So now we've got, changing the order very slightly, we're going to have Andrew Rennie, our planetary and space science expert, going to give us an update of what's happening out there in the universe. Andrew.
Well, evening, everyone. Now, okay. The reason I'm pausing is that the critical area on where I'm going to thanks. It's the one I have to look at because I'm not going to turn around looking there every time. Now, this is basically take 2 on last month's presentation with a bit of an update on a few of the stories. So Parker Solar Probe was launched during the reporting period for last month, and I am trying to get the mouse cursor. Now it's down here. It's in the right place. Okay, so this is obviously the Parker, an artist's impression of the Parker probe during one of its passes near the sun. And there was a invitation by NASA to get your name on board that probe. I accepted the invitation. And there's my name, along with about 1 million other people on the chip. And there's a little plaque that was also attached to the spacecraft. Now they're getting ready to attach it. And I don't know what they use, super glue or magnet epoxy. Whatever. Anyway, it's stuck on there, and it's getting it lined up. So if you were one of the, how many of you did accept that invitation? Hands up. Oh, only a couple of people, that's all. Well, there's your name on there anyway. You have to accept NASA's word for it that your name is actually on the chip. Now, Hayabusa, of course, is the story of this month, and this is also last month. So there are the relevant parts of the spacecraft. Of interest is the deployable camera, which is going to be deployed in order to monitor the impact of an explosive charge onto the asteroid Ryugu. And meanwhile, Hayabusa itself will snuck around the back of Hayabusa, the back of Ryugu, so it doesn't get hit by the debris. We've got here the other things, and that's the re-entry capsule that's going to bring the sample back here to Woomera in Australia. Over here, we have the target markers. These will be dropped onto the asteroid in order to mark a position, and then Ryugu will try to land, touch down, and collect samples near those markers. here are some of the rovers here. We have better pictures of them later. And this is the German-made DLR mascot rover over here. Okay. And of course, we use ion thrusting to do many of the maneuvers in space. The evidence that it had arrived at the position was on this chart here, in which we see the sudden drop-off. And bingo, that's the reception time on Earth, of course, in Japan Standard Time. This is now about 3 months ago now. It made a number of approaches to Ryugu, and this is one of the images taken during those approaches. You see it's very, very rocky, and that's going to present a problem as to where they're going to land it. Now, I landed in inverted. Ryugu itself is just going to touch down, grab some samples, and leave straight away. It won't land and sit there for a while. Now, you might say, well, how come you always see the pictures from space where the North Pole is at the top. Well, if you use the left-hand grip rule, think of the Earth. Earth rotates that way, and your thumb points to the North Pole. So that's the rule for planetary rotations. If you use the right-hand grip rule, fingers in the direction of rotation, and your thumb points to the North Pole. So that thing there is obviously rotating this way, so your thumb points that way, so that's the North Pole there. There is another way using vectors, which I prefer, but it's a bit more complicated to explain. So again, the vector rotation is going that way and the North Pole's down. Well, almost all the times, pictures that Jax is posting has the North Pole at the bottom of the picture. Ask them why. Now, of interest is this feature here at the South Pole. The asteroid down here, and most of the time Ryugu is sitting out, Hayabusa 2 is sitting out 20 kilometers away in what they call the home position or home plate, obviously taken from baseball, which is very popular in Japan. And it moves in towards the comet in this way, towards the asteroid in this way, and then it retreats back to the home plate position. And that's what it did the other day when it dropped the 2 rovers and then moved back to home plate. So when they're talking about home plate, and that home plate's 20 kilometers from the comet. I love the graphic that they've got for the mission. And here are some candidate landing sites. And it's MA7 was the one where the 2 little things were dropped down on Friday. This graphic shows where the rocks are. These rocks are rocks that are 5 meters or bigger. 5 meters or bigger. And on those green crosses is where a rock is 5 meters or bigger. Now, if you go and land on top of one of those, you're going to have problems with your spacecraft. And sorry, I can't hear you. It's a rocky asteroid. It's not a comet. Sometimes I'll trip because I'm so used to talking about comet Churyumov-Gerasimenko that I'm saying comet by habit. Anyway, this is the opposite side of Ryugu. And by the way, you can always tell which way up the picture is. This is the South Pole with that rocky outcrop. So this is one of those ones where north is actually at the top. Now, this is some of the approach pictures, and we have the opposition effect. Now, I'm not going to explain what that is, except that when the light shines directly on an object, like Saturn's rings, or in this case the thing, it looks much brighter. You get the same thing in the Apollo photos. It's when Peter gets into showing you some Apollo lunar photos, you'll see that opposition effect again. But here is the shadow. I'm just pointing to the shadow of Hayabusa as it came in towards Ryugu. Now, it's quite fascinating. On Thursday, it took them about 2 days to close in and come down to drop the two little rovers. And it was quite fascinating watching them. They were posting a picture live from the navigation camera about every half hour, live on their website. And again, we're getting closer in here now. Meanwhile, Ryugu is rotating. And now we can see quite clearly the shape of Hayabusa. It's two solar panels and the main body of the spacecraft there. And again, the opposition effect quite apparent. Now, here's the process of what they did when they came in. They drifted in at about 10 centimeters per second. They slowed that down near the end. And then when they got to about 50, 60 meters, TBD means it was to be determined. And I haven't seen an exact figure, but it was around about 60 meters. They did let the two rovers go, and they fell down and to the surface. And the equivalent, well, I'll say it when I've got it later on. Okay. Now here's the Minerva rovers here, and these are the ones that they dropped down here the other day on Friday. So this thing here opened and released the two rovers, and so on. And by the way, even though you're saying, oh, it's not a rover, it is a rover. It roves across the thing, but it does it by hopping rather than by wheels like the Lunokhod rovers did on the moon. So and these are some of the, no, I won't mention this. All right, now here's an artist's impression of the one of the landers on the surface, and this one is the one that's hopped. Now it does so by using a little arm that flicks and inside and has a gyroscopic wheel, and it then sails up and moves about 15 meters vertical and about 15 meters horizontal. Now, so here are the two Minerva, which means Micro Nano Experimental Robot for Asteroid, and the two that were released on Friday are only just a little over 1 kilogram. And they're only 7 centimeters high. Like this thing here. Okay? They're not very high at all. And the data rate, magnificent data rate return, 32 kilobits per second. Yeah, you remember that when modems were that fast? Now, so to deploy it, they have a wire cutter, which cuts some wires which are holding it. Then a simple spring pushed the rovers out. And the two rovers and the cover were ejected. So you got three things flying towards the asteroid. And the deployment happened with the sun behind Hayabusa, which is why we had that opposition effect. So the sun was behind us. And when Hayabusa 2 was about 50 meters from Ryugu, that's when the rovers were pushed out. And then Hayabusa was going to attempt to take images of the Minerva rovers as they fell towards the asteroid. Remember that Rosetta did the same thing when Philae was going down towards the comet. But Hayabusa at that point just stayed there and refrained from firing any thrusters. The reason was they didn't want to contaminate the rovers and they didn't want to disturb them, push them off. So after they were well clear, then Hayabusa 2 began to thrust away from Ryugu and returned to the home position 20 kilometers away. At that time, Hayabusa is 18 light minutes away from Earth. Ryugu itself rotates for a period of about 7.6 hours. The landing occurred at noon asteroid time, and about 1.5 hours after landing, the rovers rotated into darkness and hence out of sight of Hayabusa. At night, the rovers do nothing because they're solar powered, although they've got batteries inside. And then about 3.8 hours after touchdown, dawn came and contact was expected again with Hayabusa 2. By the way, these comments I took from watching the press conference. They had a number of press conferences on the Friday, and I watched those 3 hours of it, successive press conferences, and I took notes as I went. So these are from that press conference. So after deployment, the rovers fall towards Ryugu. 1A and 1B follow parallel trajectories, so they're just going down together. They touch down quite close to each other. The landing was at the, did I say N7 before? My apologies. It's the N6 site, north of the equator. And the impact velocity is equivalent to dropping something on Earth from 2 or 3 centimeters. So it's like dropping it like that. So it's not going to think. And someone asked about, how much damaging was that? And someone said the rovers suffered hundreds of times greater forces during the rocket launch from Earth. There's the vibration of the rocket and so on. It shook the hell out of the things. And this landing there was a just gentle thing. Yes. Don't ask me, because I was going to calculate that, do a, volume, density, and work out the. It's microgravity. So, if you were standing on it and you jumped, you'd leave it completely. And this is the problem with making these things jump, is they don't want to make the jump too big, because otherwise you'll just sail off into the distance. So once the motion ceased, the rovers were commanded to hop immediately. Now, it wasn't clear whether just one hopped, because the animation they showed, which I'm not showing you here, only showed one of them hopping. So I couldn't work out whether both hopped or whether one hopped. But there's a reason why they were hopping straight away, and that's to provide a separation between them, so they weren't both on the ground at the same place. At least one hopped, and now they had a separation between them of at least 15 meters. How do they know when to hop? Well, there's a photodiode on the rovers, and that senses whether the light's changing or not. If it's not changing, okay, we're sitting still. If it's changing, we're moving. So that's how the time of it. And maneuver itself decides when to hop. And one of the things they were asked and explained, for the first time I've heard a decent explanation, why did they lose the rover on Hayabusa 1? And the answer is the light travel time. They were commanded from Earth to separate. By that time, Hayabusa 1 was now retreating from Itokawa, and they released it while it was retreating. Of course, that's the thing. So this time they said, okay, we'll do this autonomously. And so it was done automatically. It wasn't done, So maneuver itself, decide, okay, now I'm down, I've stopped moving, now hop. And it also decides itself how many pictures to take there. And that depended on the solar cell power, whether it's in the sun or not, and also the battery state. One of the great things, of course, if it does end up in a shadow, it can hop and get itself into the sunlight, which is what Philae could not do. Okay. Hayabusa stores the data on board, and the data is sent up to Hayabusa and stored on Hayabusa. That data can't be sent back to Earth immediately. One, data rate, and secondly, communications opportunities. So it's usually sent back several days, which is one of the reasons why we didn't see the pictures of the hop and so on until yesterday. So it's usually several days before the data is sent back to Earth. The exception are the navigation images, which can be, and usually are, sent back in real time. Okay, and JAXA has been posting those navigation pictures occasionally in real time, which means about one every half hour or so. Now, both the two rovers took images during descent and bouncing. Some of those images might show the other rover. We weren't sure whether it would or not. Pictures taken in flight will assist in estimating the distance and height of the hops, because when it hops, they don't know how far it's going or whatever. Well, it's a pictures thing, and if they get one picture, they can say, oh, yeah. If they get 2 or more pictures, they can work out the trajectory. And if they see the shadow of the rover, they can then estimate how high it is. So they can work out the trajectory from that sort of information. As I said before, the hops are expected to be about 15 metres in height and distance, but it could be less, it could be a bit more, but when it touches down, it may roll either further away or even roll back towards where it came from, depending on the terrain and so on, because it's like tossing a coin, and it can land edge on and roll. Yeah, right. They're expecting that the in-flight pictures are going to be more useful than ones on the ground. Because you imagine this thing. You don't see much, huh? Like that. But if you go up, hey, that's the go on that. Now, so how do we know if the rover's moved? Well, the pictures may change. The photodiodes will give a different signal, and there's also a motor sensors which says yes, the motor worked, and there's a gyroscope as well, which also has telemetry back. So there's 3 ways you know if the rover's moved. How high or how far has it moved? I covered a bit of that already. The departure and arrival times, the data from the gyroscopes will tell us a bit. And the light intensity of the surface, because as you move away, the light intensity will change. And of course, the more photos, the better it'll be. Now, so what went wrong last week? Michael mentioned it on the radio program. Well, when it was coming in to do the test approach and then intended to go away, Hayabusa has 2 LiDARs. LiDAR is light detection and ranging. And short distance mode, if light is reflected back, is bright. So if it's bright, the Hayabusa says, okay, I must be pretty close to this thing. If it's faint, not much light, it says, I must be a fair distance away. And it switches autonomously between the 2 LiDAR modes, depending on the brightness. Okay. Now, so what happened then was, at about 150 meters, it got less light detected than expected, and this caused the LiDAR modes to switch unexpectedly. Now, so here's one of the pictures. There's Hayabusa at the top, the solar panels, and that's the body of the spacecraft, and here's the asteroid down here, and it's blurred because the rover was tumbling. And this is during one of the hops. Sorry, no, that's on the way down as it's falling down. This is the sunlight reflecting on the camera lens, and this is the asteroid down here. And so this is during the hop. All right, now, and they also apologised for the delay. When they released those pictures yesterday, they apologised for the delay in doing so. Okay. Now, ALICE. 2 stories connected to Mr. Doppler. First up, I'm going to go to this movie, go 5 minutes into it, which is going to be, just about there. Good.
Particles in the atmosphere. As it is moving back to the satellite again, the color of the light is slightly changing. This is the same effect as you see from an ambulance passing. If an ambulance
So ALS is designed to measure winds. Now, Doppler.
The Doppler effect. In Sheldon's words,
it's the apparent change in the frequency of a wave caused by relative motion between the source of the wave and the observer.
The Doppler effect is perhaps best explained visually. So here's a thing that is emitting waves. It could be a fire truck emitting sound, it could be a star emitting light, it could be a duck creating ripples on a pond. Those are all waves, and they all look something like this. We see the Doppler effect happening when the thing that is emitting waves moves. In the direction it's moving, the wavefronts bunch up, and behind it they spread out. If our object is moving towards a stationary observer, these bunched up waves are observed at a high frequency, and if the object is moving away from a stationary observer, the waves are observed at a lower frequency. So that is the Doppler effect, the apparent change in the frequency of a wave caused by relative motion between the source of the wave and the observer. It makes sense, but it gets interesting when you consider some of its applications. So let's say you are standing in the middle of a road. That's you, and a car drives past you very fast. As it does so, it honks its horn, because you're standing in the middle of the road. The horn to you might sound something like this. So it starts at a high pitch and moves to a lower pitch, even though from the driver's perspective, the horn is playing the same pitch the entire time. So what's going on? As the vehicle's coming towards you, the sound waves that it's emitting bunch up, and so are delivered to you at a higher frequency, which you interpret as a higher pitch, because the frequency of sound waves is pitch. And then when the vehicle passes you and is moving away from you, the sound waves spread out, and so you hear them at a lower frequency, a lower pitch. So that's how the Doppler effect works with sound. It also affects another kind of wave, light. So let's say you look out your observatory and you see a star. Just like the car's sound waves, if the star is moving towards you, even just a little bit, the light waves that it emits will be bunched up, meaning that you see the light at a higher frequency than it actually is. Frequency in sound is pitch, so what does it mean for light? Well, if we look at our handy pocket electromagnetic spectrum chart, we'll see that a small change in frequency for visible light will change its colour. Higher frequency light waves means bluer light, and lower frequency light waves means redder light. This is called redshift, and it may possibly be among the weirdest and coolest things of all time. Stars, or anything that you can see, change colour depending on their relative motion to you. Of course, you can't see this minute difference with your eyes, but astronomers with the right equipment can use this effect to tell whether stars are moving away from or towards Earth.
Right, now, that effect is used in helioseismology and in the ALS mission, which is one of the most complex missions ever launched. And I'm not going to have time tonight to go through the rest of my presentation here, but what we've got is the word helioseismology is derived from Greek, and it turns out that there are sound waves moved through the sun. This little animation here shows one mode of vibration in the sun. Now, when that sound wave reaches the surface, it makes the surface move up or down. So the surface goes up and down. Now, this means that if the surface is facing you, it's coming towards you or away from you. And as a result, it has Doppler color change. Yeah. Okay, Ashley, how do I get back out of stop? Top right hand? Oh, up there. Yeah, okay, it's a Windows machine. So I'm looking at that obliquely. Okay, and there are many, many modes that go through the sun, including, just a few shown there. I do have animations of all those, but we don't have all night to watch them. Next thing is standing waves. That the sun oscillates with standing waves. And here are some vibrations. Now, when it's moving towards you, it's shown as a blue color, blue shift, and when it's moving away from you, it's shown as a red shift. So these standing waves are on the sun all the time. And there are many, many modes of vibration. And we can analyze those vibrations and frequency and angular direction. Now, spectral lines. The sun emits all colors, but there are certain colors that are absorbed by the elements in the sun, for example, helium. Next thing is that a line is not exactly sharp because the atoms in the sun are moving. And as a result, you get Doppler shift of the thing, and so the bands are wider than they would be if the atoms were stationary. And that means that with the Doppler shift, these lines are shifted towards the red or the blue, depending on whether they are going away from us or towards us. Next thing is that if we put a filter on the spacecraft looking at the sun, and we just look two sides of that band, one is blue shifted and the other is red shifted. Now, if that intensity changes, then you can tell whether that's moving towards you or away from you. So this is a very rushed explanation because I'm running out of time. So you filter it. Now the filter can let through the red. It's not red light, it's just shifted slightly to the red. Or the light that you can filter so it shifts the other way. So what the filter does is oscillate quickly between one side and the other. Right, very quickly. And the detector detects the relative strength of those two signals. And obviously, if that one signal is stronger than the other, then it means it's moving away from you. If it's stronger, if the other one's side is stronger, it's moving towards you. As a result, we can get a radial velocity measurement from this detection. And as a result, we get what's called a Dopplergram. And this one shows the sun is rotating because there is a difference of about 2 kilometers per second between the two sides of the sun, one coming towards us and the other one going away. Then what you do is you just remove that rotation rate of the sun, and there now we have the bits of the sun that are coming towards us and the bits that are going away from us in different colors. And the velocities are measured there, and that allows you then to, with the SOHO spacecraft, which has a number of instruments, but in particular the microsynth Doppler imager, allows you then to prepare pictures of the sun and look inside the sun. Now, that sound can then be fed into an audio amplifier, and here's just one mode of vibration. Well, we haven't got time to listen to that for a whole minute. And 3 modes, a bit more complicated. And of course, the sun has thousands of modes of vibration. Well, the next part of my story, to finish up, is, I don't know, did I show you the intern picture, the movie? No. NASA, this has been known for, all that stuff there, I wrote for school kids, well, rewrote from a Dutch original, for school kids in the 1990s, about mid-1995. And some interns this summer, a northern summer, discovered these sounds and thought, oh, yeah, that'll make a good project. And they made this video, and NASA put it on their front page, web page, a few weeks ago, as if this was new. Hey, look what we've discovered. In fact, it was a 20-year-old story. Now, ALICE works in much the same way. A laser beam, remember LiDAR, I explained before, is shone down into the Earth's atmosphere. The laser has a precisely defined wavelength and color. Aerosols then reflect that light back, and we're finishing up, Peter. And from that, you can work out whether it's moving towards you or away, how fast the dust particles in the air are moving. Now, that's much more reliable than looking at clouds, which, of course, form and they can be in the one place, but the wind's blowing past. And wave measurements on the ocean, again, they're not terribly reliable for getting wind speed. And that only tells you at the surface anyway. So that, now, I'm just going to jump over these quickly. We're not going to explain these now. We're running out of time to do that. I've got one last picture I want to show you. I am going to broadcast on Wednesday a radio program devoted to the 60th anniversary of NASA. And I wanted some songs about NASA. Now, I've already got some, but I thought, I'll just see if there's anything better. So I searched songs about NASA. Well, it came up with a whole lot of songs rubbishing NASA, saying NASA lies, that the Earth is flat, that all the moon walks are faked and everything like that. And I spent 2 days searching through these songs. I hate rap music, and a lot of these songs are in rap style. Anyway, I thought, this is just a bit of fun anyway. I downloaded a whole lot of these songs and burnt them to 2 CDs. So now I've got 2 CDs of songs that say the Earth is flat. Well, not only have I just finished doing that, but what do I discover yesterday? That picture on NASA's website, which is exactly what the flat Earth people are saying the Earth is like. So, Jim, you should have known better. You know what Jim I'm referring to. And or is Jim one of those crazy people? Anyway, that's all, folks.
Thanks, Andrew. As always, we ran out of time and we've got a lot of stuff to get through, but that was great, fantastic, and we'll see if we can work out whether it is flat or not. I think there was a guy who had a rocket that was trying to find out. He can take a picture from up high and take a picture of the Earth and see if it was actually round. But was that a steam-powered rocket a couple of months ago? So anyway, we're now going to finish off with our final part of the evening, which is Angelo de Grazia and Michael Abdilla with the space industry update for us this month. Over to you, Angelo.
Well, clearly I don't have enough time, so I'll do what I can. Okay, just tell me when you're ready. Okay, this is a quick update of what's happened during the month, so I'll start to go through it. And we've decided to change the format a little bit. We'll talk about Australian Space Agency. Couple of nice pictures. Gilmore Space, we did talk about it at last meeting, but they are an Australian Singapore-based rocket company, and they did do some engine testing here. I won't read all this, but it's a Queensland-based company, and they're basically one of these multiple efforts that are going on around the world to launch small satellites. And lo and behold, we've got our own homegrown Gilmore Space that wants to fly rockets out of Queensland, which is fantastic. Another key event that happened was Dr. Megan Clark, who, for those that don't know, she's the, I think it's CEO or something of that order of the Australian Space Agency, and she recently signed an agreement with France's CNS Space to build space industry capability in Australia. Also good news. Queensland also launched a space industry inquiry on how it can become the home research, design and manufacturing in Australia hub. Well, it turns out that every other state in the country is doing the same thing. So we're all competing against each other to see who's going to do what. I think the Australian Space Agency has a bit of a task on its hands. But the Australian space industry is worth $3 to $4 billion and employs 10,000 people. And it's not just direct space, it's, agriculture and all sorts of other various industries that participate in space or use space-based technology. The idea in Queensland to actually turn it into a space hub actually originates back to the old Joe Bjelke-Peterson days back in '86 when they were talking about launch complex in Queensland. So that was interesting. Northern Territory also gets in the act. They are trying to get a launch site going in Arnhem Land, Nullumbai Spaceport. So again, they want to tap into the global market. They call it an equatorial launch site. It's probably as close as we've got to the equator, but could bring what they estimate to be $100 million to Northern Territory. So there you have it. Another thing that happened was the United States House of Reps actually gave the Australian Space Agency a bit of a nod and, recognised Australia's contribution now to, or future contribution into space, which is an interesting take. It was commended by a resolution, and it recognises obviously the long history and partnership. And Minister Karen Andrews told Parliament that the Australian Space Agency could create 20,000 new jobs or businesses and new technology to support our farmers, logistics, transport, etc. And also is there to inspire young people. So in addition, and I didn't know this, and I don't know how, I haven't checked the figures, the 2018-19 budget invested $260 million to grow Australia's world-leading satellite infrastructure. I didn't know that. So that's quite significant. So a lot more than the space agency is getting. So it's very good. Oh, sorry, that was one of the names that was being considered at the time. And I think this is a take from Eagle as one, but in Australia we have some advantages. We just let go of the ropes and the rocket just falls into orbit. SpaceX. That was the topic for the month. SpaceX announced last Monday that the Japanese billionaire had purchased a flight on the company's BFR rocket for a trip around the moon carrying a group of artists. He bought all 8 seats, but apparently the BFR can carry 12. So clearly there must be 4 other astronauts involved. The aspirational timeline, all going well, is 2023. Exactly, but in those early flights, I suspect, but, as they say in The Castle, if you know that movie, tell them they're dreaming. I can't see that happening in 2023.
What happened to his Apollo 8 flight?
This is it. There may be...
The last one on Falcon Heavy.
No, that's gone. That's now gone.
Because they're not planning to man-rate human rate.
They're not man-rating the Falcon Heavy. That's...
He never unannounced it, of course.
He did. He did. He did unannounce it. Anyway, the interesting thing is.
This Japanese guy is one of the guys that were forget.
Okay, moving on. There he is. I've left the spelling there, Michael. Yusaku Mizawa, 42-year-old, former punk rock musician, drummer actually, who became a fashion entrepreneur and art collector and is now worth $2.9 billion, has bought the flight. Someone mentioned tonight it was $100 million, but it's got to be more. Got to be more. He's bought 9 seats. There he is. Interesting character. He's created a little hashtag called Dear Moon, so you can follow his escapades on Twitter and others.
I think the 100 million is the flight and 200 million is the insurance cost.
I don't think an insurance company would go near him, to be brutally frank. Anyway, there he is, playing around with Elon Musk. And
big mystery is now over. Elon Musk has been hinting at the identity of this passenger since last week. We now know who he is, and fair to say he's more than just a little bit happy, sitting on the shoulders of the founder of SpaceX. His name is Yusaku Mizawa. He is a Japanese billionaire entrepreneur. He was the founder of a very popular Japanese online retail company called ZoZoTown. It's unclear how much he paid for this trip, but Musk says it was a lot of money. But Mizawa won't be going to launch the space tourism industry so that you and I can travel to space. This is another picture that Musk had tweeted out. And Musk himself has said that he wants to create a multi-planetary system in which we can live on different planets. We can live on Mars and other planets. But the company, though, has had ambitious goals in the past that it has not made. For example, last year, SpaceX said it wanted to send 2 tourists to space by this year on another rocket, the Falcon Heavy, and then that was delayed until next year. It's unclear that's still going ahead in light of this. This mission, though, will not be taking off until 2023. We got to show you this picture once again because he looks like a little kid on Christmas Day. But the last time, though, that anyone was in space on a mission was the Apollo mission in 1972. So it has been a very long time. Big mysteries now.
Okay. The other part of this announcement that he made at SpaceX was the BFR. Now, this is the 3rd iteration of this rocket. And someone did ask him, have you actually frozen the design? And clearly the answer is no, it hasn't been frozen. So the reality is to build a rocket of that scale in such a short time period is really optimistic, to say the least. But this is a huge rocket. And some of the features, it actually got longer than the last time he announced this rocket in 2017. It grew a couple more fins. What they're using the fins for are obviously landing legs to give stability to this thing when it lands, which they need. But it is still a monster rocket. And this is what it looks like. And they've actually got these canard fins at the front that give it good control regime in flight. It really is huge rocket. The other interesting features. Yeah. It's the way it glides in. Yes, it's part of the way it actually re-enters. But see those things around. They call them the aft cargo. I've seen pictures where that there actually folds in and comes in and completely covers the engines. Wouldn't surprise me if that's a heat shield of some sort.
Someone did ask me about that, and he said, no,
That's not what it is. And let's see what he says next year.
He said though that if you pull out 2 of those cargo pods
Yeah.
underneath the engines, it can make it zero pressure. But they don't need that.
There was a couple of theories I read too. There's also to make in space the engine bells need to be bigger because of the way the pressure and or lack of pressure works, and they're more efficient that way. And there was suggestion that those things created that kind of pressure regime to the engines. But again, you take your guess. There it is, launching from the Cape. Actually, it probably won't be the Cape. It'll probably be in Texas. He's building a launch site in Brownsville, Texas, right near the Mexican border. He's actually building this thing because the early flights of the bottom bit's called the BFR, Big Falcon Rocket. The top bit is called the BFS, Big Falcon Spaceship. They're building the spaceship part first, and they'll be supposedly doing hot tests next year in Texas. And there it is, heading to space. There it is, dropping off the booster. That booster is a flyback booster, by the way. It lands precisely back where it launched from, and what they do is then they just drag another one of these BFSs on top of it, and they launch it again. That's the aspiration. Good to have objectives, I must say. And there it is with solar panels deployed. And this was a really nice picture that was going around. And, you know, on your way to Mars or the moon, you can listen to concerts with the moon and the Earth or Mars in the background. There it is heading for the moon. Whilst Mars is his objective, you know, the moon is part of the plan as well. He has tried over the years, and NASA's have actually looked at it, he's tried to get funding to develop this from NASA and the Air Force. To date, no go. I don't think either of them want to risk a lot of money in this. And so what he's done is he's looking for other business models. One of them is get some rich billionaires to invest in it, which is exactly what he's done with the Japanese guy. There it is. This was one of the flight regimes, and you can see the graphs on how he lands and how he dissipates the energy from orbit. And this is the colony, the start of the colony. He made a statement the other day, again, if all goes well, 2028, you might see that. But you'll notice that the dates are slightly slipping from where we were talking some years ago. But still pretty fantastic sort of stuff. And you'll see the change from the last version, 2017, to the 2018 version. And here's the mandrel, I think they call it, and they wrap carbon fibre around it, and they create, oh, by the way, that's the actual size of it relative to people. They had a picture, a mural stuck on the wall there as they made the presentation, so you could actually get a feel of how big this thing really is. And there's the first carbon fibre composite tank that's coming out, and it's huge. Someone said that someone snuck a view, because they're building this in the port of Los Angeles inside a big tent, and someone said that they saw a dome part of this structure going together, which again, this whole thing is carbon fibre. And if people have a long memory back to the X-38, what was it called, Venture Star? X-33, the Venture Star. That hit technical snags throughout its development, and one of the biggest was the use of composite fibre, and they abandoned that program. Yeah, but they had a few other issues as well.
The issue was whether if they could get the handle with oxygen and not those cool temperature.
Sure.
I assume this is methane.
This is methane, yes, correct, and LOX.
Super chilled, but it's not cryogenic.
Correct.
So it's probably not the issue.
This is a Raptor engine. This is a real, I guess, shining light, for this particular program, because this is almost ready to go. This particular engine is almost ready to start being put into rockets. They've been firing this for a number of years. We can hear Elon Musk.
The production plan of the FR.
I won't go through this, but inspiration. Where did you get the inspiration? Oh, there you go. Funny that. There you have it. Correct. They're all. No one knows if they're optimised for space. I think it's a compromise between the two. But you're right. They had the two landing engines, and then they had the 4 space engines.
So we said that the ones on the bottom of the VFS are all sea level engines.
They are they? Okay.
But they're just making the one engine for both VFR and VFS.
The truth is that's where they get tested the hardest, is in the atmosphere. So it makes sense what they've done.
He wants it for the single stage orbit and Earth hopping.
Yeah.
Making money.
The Earth hopping is not an insignificant issue, because if you're willing to fly one of these things, you can get to London in 45 minutes. It'll take you longer to get to the airport than it will to get to London on a suborbital BFS to Europe. So that's where he thinks he's got a business case, and he probably has if you're willing to fly. Sorry? Business case. Anyway, some more inspiration from the 50s. Oh, holy cow. This is another thing that was around 1966. It's actually started in 64, the Thunderbirds. That's Thunderbird 3, which was the... That was real. That was real. All right, very quickly, Mike, you can tell me when to wind up. This guy died not so long ago. He was Senator John McCain. He was very vocal in the United States of trying to ban the Russian rockets being used. As you know, there's 2 rockets that use Russian rockets, the Atlas V and the Antares rocket. They both use Russian engines, and he did put a lot of pressure on the government to stop the import of these engines. And now a lot of rocket development kind of spurred off that particular need to wean off Russian engines. He was a Vietnam vet, POW, I think Trump was alluding to the fact he was a traitor because he got caught. Anyway, there was some funny logic there. And but he did run for the presidency against Barack Obama in 2008. So he was an interesting character. And there they are, the Russian engines, the most efficient engines you'll find around. And Igor can talk about these, but these things are fantastic. The Americans haven't even come close to getting some of the power that these Russian engines produce. So they will be missed. Yes, they did, but they're still one of the most powerful engines you'll get, even though there's one engine with dual nozzles, and there's the Antares. The other thing that NASA was doing was considering naming rights. So God only knows where that's going to lead us. International Space Station, a bit of mystery and intrigue. Well, it turns out last month someone found a hole in the Soyuz orbital module, and clearly must have been meteorite. Well, it turns out someone's drilled a hole in it, and apparently someone plugged up the hole, which must have come loose in space. Hence, there was a pressure leak, and so all suspicions arose as to who did it. Was it done during the manufacture? Was it done on the launch pad? And then all of a sudden, they started to accuse the cosmonauts and astronauts. In particular, I think the Russian media went to town on, must have been the Americans, had to be the Americans. They're now going to do a spacewalk to investigate where this hole originated from and what it's about. It's coming up in November, and they just don't know what caused it. No, it couldn't have been this bloke. This is Dmitry Rogozin. He's the head of Roscosmos, and I think first used by yourself in a presentation, was it?
No, I didn't use it.
Oh, you haven't used it yet? Okay. Well, I got in first. The other thing is Jim Bridenstine and Dmitry Rogozin apparently are going to be meeting in Boganow on the 10th of October. Very interesting, because this guy, Dmitry Rogozin's on the CIA most wanted list as some sort of terrorist or something. He's the guy that said about the American access to space, you better go and get yourself a big trampoline, right? Referring to the fact that the Americans couldn't get their own people off the ground. That's going to change soon, but nonetheless, he went to town on that. So that'll be an interesting meeting, actually. Are they? And there's Rogozin with the other bloke. They are great sense of humour. Commercial crew. As we know, this is the American access to space that'll start next year, presumably. These are the capsules. These are some of the timelines. Second quarter 2019 for Boeing, pad abort test. So that's coming late 2018 to early uncrewed flight using the Atlas, which, by the way, uses the Russian engines, to the ISS. And then in mid-2019, there'll be the crewed flight. It's still a test flight, but they're looking at potentially not making it a test flight and actually making it test/operational. So that'll be interesting. There it is, the Starliner sitting on top of the Atlas rocket. These are the spacesuits. I'm not going to go into this video. Move on. Commercial crews. This is SpaceX. They're going to be doing, probably before the end of the year, they're going to be doing their unmanned test flight. And it looks like they're heading in that direction. Sorry, which is I didn't think they'd do it, but we'll wait and see. But they are also going to do a flight aboard test. So they're going to launch, I think it'll be a Falcon 9 Block 4 version, one of these throwaway versions of the rocket. And at maximum dynamic pressure, they will fire the capsule to see that it works properly. So we'll see that before the end of the year, and we might even see that uncrewed flight go off. And then in April next year, they're targeting to launch the first men back out of the Cape since 2011. That'll be pretty amazing. What has happened in the interim is Oh, there it is. I'll come to that in a sec, I think. There it is sitting on the pad. There it is coming down. NASA recently reconfirmed that it has accepted a previously controversial fueling method called load and go for up commercial crew. That is different from past missions where they used to fill up the rocket first, then put the astronauts on top. Here, you're going to have the astronauts sitting on that thing when they fill it up. And there's always been a lot of controversy about that. But in order to formally certify that, they have to do a number of tests in the upcoming Falcon 9 Block 5 launches that are scheduled for up until next year. Space and Boeing, the two companies, they both believe they've done enough work on their spacecraft to meet a key NASA safety threshold. NASA wanted a high risk factor of 1 to 270. When I looked at that, I thought, geez, that's pretty low. 1 in 270, is loss of crew. But that's what they have to achieve, and they were having difficulty getting there. But they reckon they've got it. So what NASA has to do now is just review the data and see that that's right. There have been a number of reviews in America, and one of the key reviews was, can both Boeing and SpaceX achieve the safety guidelines? Space Launch System, I'll stop after this. This is the actual first manned shell for the Orion capsule. This is the government version of the rocket. There's a lot of history behind why we've got 3 capsules now in the United States that can carry men. But this recently came to Florida for final assembly. And there it is in its final form. I won't play that video. That's about radiation shielding. I think we saw that last time. That's kind of what it looks like inside. It's quite voluminous when you actually look at it. It's a 5-meter diameter, I think. It really is Apollo on steroids, but this spacecraft is a total generation way ahead of the Apollo. The launch complexes, you'll see the Launch Complex 39A at the bottom. That's a SpaceX launch site. And the 39B is where the Space Launch System will be flying. And they've just fitted out this mobile launch platform. And this month they've rolled it out to the pad for fitness testing, basically. Make sure it all fits together and it all works together. And you'll see it slowly inching its way from the vertical assembly building down the bottom of the page to the Launch Complex 39B up the top. And there it is. There's the flame trench at 39B, and there it is sitting on 39B. Not long after that, there's the White Room access arm that will allow astronauts to board the Orion capsule. Then they pretty much brought it into the vertical assembly building for the first time. So it got through the doors, which is pretty good. And there it is in its full glory. Someone told me that the colours and the markings have changed again, but we'll see what happens, because this thing won't go off until about 2020 in Exploration Mission 1, 2022 probably for Exploration Mission 2, which is the manned version. And the other thing they did this month was they did the final qualifying tests of the Orion parachutes. This was the last of the tests, and it came through with flying colours. So that was a good outcome. I can't believe the sequencing of these parachutes. They're all reefed. I forget the terminology that they use, but it comes out in about 25 stages of things happening, of drogue chutes coming out, of the parachutes inflating, and it's quite an amazing sequence of events. They've been throwing it at out of the C-17 aircraft. There they go. There they go. And see how they slowly inflate? That's quite deliberate. Keep the stresses off the chutes. Pretty cool. Anyway, so they will now qualify these, so they're ready to go for manned spaceflight. Exploration Mission 1, I produced this diagram last month, but it's worthy of getting a hold of that picture and just studying it. It's brilliant. This is, the trip to the moon and the tests that they'll do in between, and the flyby, and I don't think or do they orbit? Not even quite sure. I don't think they do. They keep getting swung around and move across. All right, did you want to finish off? All right, that's it? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Angelo. That was fantastic, and I think Michael had a bit of work involved in doing that. So what we do, Mike, Angelo and I also do a little bit of a segment in Andrew's radio show each week, which summarises a lot of this information on the radio. So if you want to tune into that, more than welcome. That's it for tonight's meeting. Hope you enjoyed it, and glad you came along tonight. And grab something to eat on the way out. We're going to start packing up everything here now, and we'll see you October 22nd for October 1968. Thanks, everyone.